Okay, would like to call this meeting of the HHR Building Committee to order at 10:03 a.m. Good morning, everybody. Thanks everybody for making time on a Friday morning to get together. A couple of big milestones to try to get past today. It's been a very, very active week for the committee. The first thing I'd like to do, some housekeeping, if we could approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was a little over 2 weeks ago on April 28th. Sarah had sent those around with the agenda. So if we could get a motion to approve those minutes. Anybody feel like making a motion?
Motion from James.
Paul moves, Jill seconds, all in favor? Paul, put your hand up. Unanimous. Okay, minutes approved. Is there any public comment? Elizabeth, I don't know that we've met. Elizabeth Pulowski?
She's one of the school reps.
Oh, great. Okay. One of the PTO reps?
Yes.
Holmes,
Great.
yes, Elizabeth Holmes?
Homeschool, yes.
Yep, okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Welcome. That way Jess Levy doesn't feel like she's the sole PTO rep here.
I have Caitlin Cahill as a PTO rep. Have you guys switched? Do I need to change just because I have that in the presentation? Liz, do I need to switch your name in instead?
I think she's going to still be somewhat involved. So
Okay.
I would keep her. She's the head of our PTO.
Okay.
So she wants to, I think we should keep her in just in case the two of us need to tandem it based on meeting schedules and stuff.
Okay.
If that's okay.
I think we have one official rep per school. You guys are welcome to share unofficially. Just
Okay.
for now, I have her in as the official rep. If that changes, just let me know, okay?
Well, then I'd be the official rep for right now.
Okay, perfect. I'll
Yeah.
put your name in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great. In terms of the chair's report, I'm going to keep it pretty short. Most people know what went on this week, but for purposes of the recording and public transparency, since our last meeting, we did not have a meeting last week. The primary focus of the past 2 weeks has been around architect selection and trying to arrive at an amount per school that we could request as our revised appropriation in order to put that into our state grant application at the end of June that O&G is helping us with. That's been the focus of our efforts over the past 2 weeks. The high point of all of that really was Monday evening when the 3 architect finalists, KG&D, Fuller D'Angelo, and Perkins Eastman, presented their conceptual design charrettes. That was a special meeting of that subcommittee, but a number of other members of the building committee attended. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail shortly. But we're going to be focusing on that today. We're going to be focusing on as well the really, really hard, detailed, good work that David Martin, Dave Cravenzola really spearheaded, but working with a number of other members of the committee, Paul Harding, Mike Lynch, to try to come up with our appropriation request. That was, essentially went from a standing, went full speed ahead once we got the architect's estimates on Monday, and I think we'll have a fairly detailed report to go through so that people can see how they arrived at the numbers that we're going to propose. And then, there's a lot still coming up. Next Monday and Tuesday, we have a Board of Selectmen presentation to try to put that appropriation request in front of the Board of Selectmen. The next evening, the 17th, the same thing for the Board of Finance. And then the week after that, two committees, I guess 3 committees for the RTM, Finance and Budget, Education and Rules, looking to a June the 6th RTM meeting to get that those resolutions and adjusted appropriation approved. So a lot to do. I joke that it would be nice if we could just get the auditorium one evening and get everybody in the same, I get all those people in the same room. But I guess that's not the way it works. So we'll present this 5 separate times and hopefully get 5 affirmative answers. With that, I guess I'd like to turn, unless anybody has any questions on anything I just went over. Okay, not hearing any. I'd like to go on then to the architect selection process. I'll just quickly wind the clock back a little bit and take people through the steps in the process. Early on in one of our very, very first full committee meetings, we identified a subcommittee of folks with expertise on the committee that would take the lead on selection of the architects, and then subsequently as well the selection of the construction managers. That subcommittee was Jill McMahon, Paul Harding, Jameson Riley, Frankie Schuster, and then from our ex officios, Dr. Adley and Mike Lynch, and then that basically became the standing subcommittee to lead that effort. From a process standpoint, Kate Bush and Mike Lynch put together RFPs that the town, excuse me, that the town sent out to the architectural community. We identified a number of architects that we thought were likely candidates. The RFP looked a lot like the RFP that was used for Ox Ridge, with obvious adjustments to reflect the fact that this was going to be a renovation project, not a new build. The RFPs went out to the architectural community. We got, I believe, 9 responses to the RFPs. The subcommittee met and discussed and went through the RFPs, and from that selected 4 firms to interview. We then held those firms were KG&D, Perkins Eastman, Fuller D'Angelo, and NCA. Thank you. Those interviews were held over a course of 2 evenings. The members of the subcommittee, Dr. Adley, Mike Lynch, with a lot of support from Jess Levy, attended those meetings. From that process, we narrowed the field down to 3: KG&D, Perkins Eastman, and Fuller D'Angelo, to prepare their conceptual design charrettes. At the same time that they were working on the charrettes, and prior to the presentation of those charrettes, folks behind the scene, members of the committee, as well as Mike Lynch, spent a bunch of time, frankly, diligencing the candidates, right? Calling references, talking to folks in other school districts who had worked with these guys. And then Jill and I were able to tour a couple of the schools that these architects had worked on recently. And side note, everybody involved in school facilities in Westchester and Connecticut knows Mike Lynch. So that was kind of fun to play Do You Know? And everybody's like, oh yeah, Mike. Yeah, I know Mike. Say hi to Mike. So anyway, that was kind of a fun part of the process. But we toured the schools. We talked to the facilities folks. We talked to the folks who are our counterparts to the extent that we could, to try to diligence these architects as best as we could. The architects then presented their charrettes on Monday evening, and I think that was a really, really, really useful process. That's something that the Ox Ridge Committee had done. We followed in their footsteps. We took their recommendations, and it was super helpful. One of the things I remarked as we get closer to the kind of the recommendation piece of this was, I'm glad we didn't just pick off of the interviews, because I think that certain of the architects did much better in the charrette process than in the interview process, and certain of the architects did better in the interview process than in the charrette process. People asked a lot of questions. It was great to see how engaged people were in the process. Dave Cravanzola joined us for the charrette presentation so that he didn't have to start from, you know, absolute zero and starting to work on his cost estimates. We then, the subcommittee then, over a course of a number of phone conversations between Monday evening and yesterday, spent a lot of time talking about which architect we thought was going to be the best for the town, for the school district. And what we did is identified a number of criteria that we used as the points that we were going to judge the finalists against. And in no necessary order of priority, those were the quality of the design and the functionality of the design that they proposed, their project management skills and experience, how they proposed to phase and schedule the project, including how long they thought the project would take from selection to completion, the overall strength of the team that was being presented, the quality of their mechanical engineering team and selection, which is a third party, but because one of the things we're coming to realize is that a very, very large proportion of this project is going to be mechanical engineering, systems, things like that. It's going to be critical that there's a very, very strong engineering team involved. The experience and the expertise that they have in the state grant process, and their proposed cost estimates. So those were the criteria that we highlighted as the most important. Over the course of 3 days of pretty robust debate, and also getting input from Mike Lynch and getting input from Randy Giraldo, who worked on the Ox Ridge project, and who attended the charrette presentation. The subcommittee came to a consensus that the right architect engineering firm for us for this project was going to be KG&D. We spent a lot of time on it, but you know, taking it against that set of criteria, we came to the conclusion that KG&D was who we were going to recommend. That was a pretty long monologue, so I'll stop there and let people ask any questions, make any comments. Certainly anybody from the subcommittee who wants to weigh in on that, please do. This isn't meant to be, you know, me telling people who we're going to vote for. This was very much of a discussion and a consensus. So I'd like to get any thoughts, comments, views on that.
I'll comment just because I was involved with a lot of the discussion. You know, we felt that we had, you know, two really good candidates, and we went through the pros and cons painstakingly with the subcommittee, with obviously Mike Lynch's input, and you know, just rest assured that, you know, I don't feel any stone was unturned. You know, I'm fully supporting recommending KG&D. I don't think we would have made a mistake hiring Perkins. And, you know, they're a larger firm. And that was one of the things, we had a lot of experience at the state. But we really like, for all the things that Chris said, we really like KG&D. I think they're going to serve us well. They're going to serve the town well. They're going to serve the overall vision of what we want to do, what we're trying to accomplish as this committee. So I just wanted to reiterate what Chris said, that there was a lot of time spent, and that we started with 10 great candidates. We got down to 3 very, very good ones. And ultimately, this is the decision or the recommendation we're making to the full committee, and are looking forward to working with them if we vote that way to go forward. And like I said, they have experience working with Darien. They have experience working with Mike Lynch. And again, I'm just kind of reiterating, but the mechanical portion of this project is paramount. And Borelli is someone who knows us intimately in our schools and understands what we need to make these transitions happen for these renovations. So saying all that, I think, timeline also, we were happy with the look at their schedule, and bus loops and traffic patterns and things of that nature. All that was taken into account. So I think the rest of the subcommittee would agree with that.
Yeah, I'll slip in real quick and echo what Paul's saying. On face value, I had one viewpoint, but after we spent a lot of time and hearing from the other board members, getting to know and asking questions of the actual people leading these teams at the architecture firms, definitely we came to a decision, or at least I came to my decision, that KG&D was the right one to recommend. I think we're going to get the most personal experience from them. I think either firm we would have been okay with, as Paul said, but I think we're going to get the most for our students and our teachers, which is the priority out of KG&D. This past experience in the town with them, they're committed to making this project a priority. So that was ultimately why I led to my decision to recommend KG&D.
Mike, any thoughts just from your end? Is that you and Dr. Adley? I mean, obviously you guys are Dr. Adley in particular, you're the end customer here, you're the end user.
Yeah, I think I thank you for everybody's work in this capacity, because you've done a lot in the last couple of weeks in particular. I think both of those designs, I think would have been happy with. Both of them would have got there in the end, right? Because they're going to be able to see each other's anyway, right? They would have been able to get there in the design. So I think I would have been happy enough with either from a design point of view. Originally, Easton, their presentation of me, I was trying to get beyond some presentation stuff because they come across a little bit more, in my opinion, engaging in that way. But that's not really the factor that we're talking about. I think them keeping the old library in front of the facade right away didn't resonate with me as much. But I think both of them would have got to a design that we approved and would have worked for us. So the other important issues, mechanical and otherwise, being deciding factors. I think we've made a good choice. I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
And I would just say that, what Paul said kind of echoed what I had written to you and Jill the other night. Either one could do the job and do a great job. You might get more of a wow factor with KG&D. And I feel strongly you're definitely getting the better mechanical engineer. So
great.
Good
Yeah, and
choice
just as a data point, KG&D, if folks may recall, KG&D did the existing conditions survey in 2016. So they've already studied these schools. So not that was a deciding factor, but that by any means, but that just gave them a bit of a head start anyway. Certainly would welcome any other thoughts, comments, input from folks that were either at Monday's presentation or had thoughts one way or the other before we put this up for a vote.
Yes, I'd just like to echo your thanks to all of we had different committee members come. A lot of people did spend a lot of time. Alan and Mike spent a lot of time attending presentations and then following up with us afterwards. People took questions from us. What do you think about this, that, or the other? And so this really was a group effort. I just would like to echo, you've said thank you, but I'd like to echo you on that.
With that, I guess I would like to get a motion to retain KG&D as the architect engineer for the 3-school renovation project. Could I
I'll
get a
second
motion,
that motion.
please? Jameson, seconded by Dave Kerwar. All in favor? Unanimous. Great. With that, I mean, just as a next step, I will put calls into the 3 finalists. I'll let KG&D know that they've been selected, and let Perkins and Fuller know that it was a close call, but they were not. Kate Bush, I guess if you don't mind coming off mute, and maybe I guess the next step really is we need to get a contract started with KG&D, correct?
In the interim, do we do a letter of intent though, Kate? Before we get contracts so they can actually start going?
I don't know that Kate is still on. She is on, but I don't know if she's walked away from the computer. So give her a second.
Okay.
So typically, when you don't have a contract in place and you're hammering out a contract, you'll have what amounts to a letter of intent so that they can start their process of drawings and things of that nature.
That's it. They're gonna
Okay.
discuss their money.
Yeah, I don't think Kate's on, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. You know what? We can, if Kate comes back on, we can circle back to that. If not, we'll
We can
separately
email.
I
Yeah.
got her.
shoot her a note or have a conversation with her on Monday.
That is how we handled the cafeteria.
I'm sorry, say again, Joe?
That is how we handled the cafeteria, the letter intent followed by a contract.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is now that we've got an architect, how are we going to pay for this project? And I'm going to largely turn this over to Dave Martin and Dave Cravenzola to walk us through the methodology for how they arrived at the amounts that they're going to that we, the committee, are going to talk about and hopefully vote on today, so that we can then plug these into presentations to be given to Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance on Monday. Dave, why don't I turn the mic over to you?
Hey, Dave, if it's okay with you, I thought maybe I would make a couple of comments in the beginning, and then I'd let you sort of talk people through the level of detail that's in your estimates and kind of how that process works. And then we could come back and summarize and sort of select our specific numbers to vote on. Does that work okay?
Sure, and just has the committee seen the estimates that we provided?
I emailed all that stuff out to them last night, the ones we had last night, and then this morning when I got the updated ones from Dave, I forwarded those along as well.
Okay, perfect. Yep, sure.
So first off, just everybody please remember, this is the phase where we go to the RTM to ask for the appropriation and the bonding resolution that we have to have in place before we can file the grant application with the state. So this is basically our testimony to the state that the town stands prepared to pay for the whole project if we don't get any reimbursement from them, and allows us to begin the process for the applying for the grant and subsequently get back whatever amounts we're going to end up getting back through the process. I know Dave's team is going to do a great job on that for us, and get us qualified for as much as we can. So we got some cost estimates from all 3 architects. One of the architects' sets of cost estimates were so far removed from the other 2 architects that presented charrettes that we sort of discounted them. And then we, unfortunately, the presentations were not exactly the same. So making them comparable to a layperson was a little more difficult. But what we did was I took the Northeast Collaborative architect estimates from April of 2021, and I escalated them 2 years at 7.5% to get them to an April 23 deadline to try to make those numbers as comparable as possible. And then put those up against the KG&D numbers and the Perkins and Eastman numbers. And then Dave's team worked very diligently, completely separately without access to the architect's numbers, to come up with their own estimates. They did speak with Perkins, if I'm correct, Dave, and to clarify certain elements within the design and those types of things. But they came up with their own specific design elements and estimates. And I will say that overall, the numbers are relatively close across all of those. But at this point, if it's okay, I thought I'd turn it over to Dave and let him sort of walk you through the level of detail that goes through the estimating process at this point, knowing, of course, that we are at a point where we don't have final design, we don't have, construction level drawings, and we haven't gone out to bid. So these numbers are an estimate for estimate's sake to make us eligible for the grant process. But Dave, if you would tell us, the level of detail and work that you guys put in on the back end to give people comfort for how the numbers were derived, that'd be great.
Sure. So
Dave and Dave, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just in terms of process, most of the time we would do cost estimating later in the project. We have an actual design. It's more unusual to do it at this conceptual stage. But because of the state grant process, we were trying to do as much diligence as possible. So you will see this cost estimation exercise come up when we actually do have a proper design. But just wanted the committee members who haven't been in construction before to understand that this is, again, because of the state process, a little bit unusual, before you jump in. Thanks.
okay, so yeah, kind of big picture, what had happened, as Chris had mentioned, when we sat in on Monday night, it gave us the ability to look and see what each of the three firms were, the approach they were going at. So while Dave mentioned, we did place a call to Perkins just to. The information that was shared with us afterward was somewhat tough to actually scale and come up with actual quantities for things. So we did call them just to get some broad, size of the project. And then we were able to look across the other charrettes and feel what were the common themes for the scope of work. So you'll see with our estimates, and I don't want to bore everyone with all the details of it, but there are two pages for each project, and they all have to be separate and distinct, because as you go through the state grant process, there are three separate grant applications. There will be all separate appropriations, and they will each have their own state project number, which is why we break everything out separate. So the first page of each of those estimates is call it the overall construction costs. When you bring a construction manager on board, eventually you will sign a guaranteed maximum price agreement with them. The value that you see on that first page is approximately what the value of that, we believe, that guaranteed maximum price would be. The next page of the estimate outlines we call them the soft costs, or all the other costs that go into a project that are outside of the construction contract. So your other professional services, your design team, costs for moving and furniture and bonding costs. And there is in there too a contingency for if things change in the project, that you have a kitty of money that's allocated for dealing with unforeseens or maybe some scope that you want to add to the project. So each of our estimates basically summarize those two main components into a total. When you get into the first page, we looked at the site of each of the projects, and we tried to look at the different site plans that each of the teams had looked at to make sure that we accounted for, who was doing, work along the road, or were we doing parking lot expansions, or, courtyards were a big theme in these schemes. So we wanted to make sure that we had allocated costs, because I think, some of those that you were seen on Monday night, they were different than what NCA had originally come up with. So we tried to make this pricing exercise reflective of the charrettes that were presented. Next, we looked at what had to be done for demolition and any abatement, and we had some good discussions about that with respect to what had been done in the building and what we thought was a safe number to apply to it. All these things they're all applied on a square foot basis. We just simply don't know enough about the project, as Jill had said, to really take off widget 1 versus widget 2 and put specific numbers on it. Then when it came to the building, we knew approximately the size of the addition that was going to happen in each school. We have a large database of what it costs to build buildings. From the project we do, we gather all that bid information, so we know the cost of those things. We know generally what it costs to build a media center space versus classrooms, things like that. So we were able to put a price on that. Where it got more interpretive was the idea of the alterations. Each of the teams had talked about some areas of the building we're going to need some what they call moderate alterations. We heard a lot of people on Monday night say, okay, well, we need to do some renovations in these areas to right size existing classrooms, or shuffle a couple programs around. So those are. Then there was the light alterations, which a couple of the design teams had said, essentially the only thing we would be doing in parts of the building would be work associated with those important MEP systems upgrades in the building. So there would be some ceiling work, some painting, some more of the aesthetic things to just patch things up after those systems were in. So we figured out what the work would be involved for each of those 2 alteration scenarios, and we took a guesstimation of that half of the existing buildings, would be treated with a moderate alteration. The other half would be light alteration, just as a benchmark. And I think that's where when you really start getting involved with the design team and with your construction manager, those are open discussions you can have about what are those expectations and what are your limitations budget-wise with that. So we're able to put a separate number on that. And then certainly the MEP system upgrades that are happening throughout the buildings, listening to what the different design teams were talking about for systems. We had done some looking through our databases, and we put some numbers on what those systems would cost. So we essentially assembled all of those costs together and then figured on what the other things were going to be, the costs for your construction manager to staff the project, the different contingencies that you will see in future estimates. You'll see all those different contingencies, escalation, and then your design contingency, and then the construction manager's contingency. Then there are the fees for pre-construction and construction management, and then bonds and insurance. So all of those things coming together essentially bring you to the full estimation of what we believe these 3 projects are going to cost. Are there any questions?
Okay, so I guess that will bring it back to me. I will simply say that with regards to the soft costs, we are once again very thankful to have Mike Lynch. Mike Lynch did a tremendous amount of work looking at the soft cost numbers to help us fill these in. And then I spoke with Jen Charneski separately regarding legal expenses and bond counsel fees to get those figures updated. So at this point, we have what we believe, to be a reasonable, good estimation for where we are in the design process. So if you guys have the Excel spreadsheet that I sent around, what it does is it takes by school and lays out the range of estimates for each of the different sources that we have broken into construction costs and soft costs, and then the total project costs. So if you're looking at Henley, The first column is Northeast Collaborative Architects. That's where I took their estimate from 2021 and escalated it at 7.5% to make it somewhat more comparable with what we're seeing from the other folks. KG&D, Perkins and Eastman, O&G, and then in the far right-hand column, I have HHRC. That was supposed to be HHRBC, obviously, but that is the number that I felt best reflected where we would want to be to go forward with. So in the case of Hindley, we have a range of estimates that range from 24.71 million for Perkins to our estimate of 26.61 million. For homes, we have a range of 20.38 million for KG&D to 24.35 for where I was estimating we should come out. And for Royal, we have a range of 23.62 was my escalated Northeast number, but the lowest actual number that was submitted was KG&D at 24.88, and based off of O&G's more detailed work and the other conversations around soft costs, I ended up at $28.28 million, which gets us to an aggregate total for the recommendation across all three schools of $79.24 million. So last night when we had our initial meeting, we thought, these numbers look all super precise and everything like that, but we all know that they are, early estimates kind of thing. So there's some discussion about rounding the numbers up. And my understanding is that in the Ox Ridge case, there was some upward rounding of their figures from the actual number that they came up with. So in this particular case, I think that it would be perfectly justifiable for us to look at. So in the case of Hindley, right, we came in with 26.61 million for the number. So we could perfectly, very easily justify rounding that to a $27 million number. In the case of homes, we came in at $24.35 million. So we actually have a choice here. We could just round it to $24.5 million, which is the closest, normal mathematical rounding methodology. Personally, I would be perfectly comfortable to round it to a completely even number and call it $25 million. For Royal, we came in at 28.28, which mathematically you would normally round up to 28.5. Again, I would be perfectly happy to round that to $29 million. If we round each of the schools to the nearest, rounded $1 million, that would come in for Hindley at 27 million, Holmes at 25 million, and Royal at 29 million for a grand total of $81 million. But I'm open to conversation if folks feel like they want to go with something that's a little more precise. I just thought that given the substantial variability that exists at this point in the design process and everything like that, I never want to go back to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM to ask for a second helping at the table. So I'm perfectly happy to go with the rounded up numbers in the 81 million, but I'm open to conversation and comments, suggestions from anyone else.
Before we jump into that, David, you appear to have used O&G's numbers for your numbers, and then you just added our local soft cost. You increased it by our local soft cost number.
I used O&G for the hard cost numbers because they were the most detailed by far of anything that we got. Right?
Okay.
We did not get. I mean, I saw the estimates that Perkins had provided for the Ox Ridge committee. Ooh, can you guys hang on 1 second? I'm going to apologize. This is the hospital calling about my aunt. Just give me 1 second.
Yes, of course.
Just to recap, make sure I heard these numbers correctly. Hinley, 27 million, Holmes, 25 million, Royal is 29 million. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Thanks, Dave.
That's if we round to the nearest million, right?
Correct. Yes.
So we may or may not use that.
Right. This was I just want to make sure I'm writing these down correctly. And Jess was emailing me asking if we can see the estimates. Yes, we can get those out to the group. We'll
Can I
have
ask a
Tuesday.
question?
Yes, Mr. Lynch.
The 81, does that include or not include anything we've already asked for and gotten?
Meaning what?
It does not, right, the 3.7.
No, that's inclusive of the 3.7. We're not asking for the 3.7 again.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you wouldn't be asking for 81, you'd be asking for, say, 78 or 77.5. Or...
Yes, we actually haven't, because we haven't received the 3.7, right? So we need to go in and ask for 81 and we'll replace it. It's a revised appropriation.
Yeah, theoretically, it's just a revision of the appropriation request. So we're asking again, if you will, from $0.
Okay. So make sure it's covered.
Yes, thank you.
Given that we've attempted to use a level of precision, I'm less interested in rounding to the nearest million. I mean, I think if we want to use a lesser precise method of getting to where we are, I'm more comfortable with the 79.75. That's just my feeling, but I don't know how other people feel. I don't particularly want to go back to the RTM, but if we really had to, it's just a,
No, I think there's some concern about price volatility with all the things that are happening.
I mean, is the concern just sticker shock around the 81 as versus starting with a 7?
I think sticker shock is, part of it. I think, I think we have, in order to control for volatility, that's why we have escalation numbers already in there. And I think if we are comfortable with our escalation numbers and our contingency numbers, that's one thing that should be built in, but I wouldn't just round on the back end. That's my feeling. I mean, a little rounding, fine, to make an even number, but I'm one of many of just a handful of a bunch of us. So happy to hear from anyone else.
I'm sorry, Mike Lynch, did you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if that number included the previous asks. The other money we've already asked to be appropriated for the project, if that 81 included that.
Yes, that would be inclusive.
That's what I was told. Yeah, I just asked.
Sarah, anybody?
No, I have not been involved with the estimates, and I kind of defer to you guys as far as whether or not we want to round up or not. I think there's been a lot of thought and effort. I think the issue is that we don't have these costs yet because we don't have a solid plan. But I know that there's been a lot of thought and effort behind these numbers.
Yeah, listen, this is my first time doing something like this, and being so early, not even having a design yet. Even with having escalations and contingencies built in, I was a little bit nervous about that, which is, I think, is why I, leaned a little bit towards rounding up. But again, I'm open to conversation. Chris, do you have some thoughts, or Paul? Paul, you have a lot more experience with these things than any of the rest of us. So, you have any?
Honestly, you're splitting hairs at this point. 81 to 79.25 on a project that's this size is, less than 1%. It's or whatever it is. It's in the construction world. No one would even think twice about this. If you were, I really don't have it. I think going in at 79 is fine. I think, 1 million is not going to make or break the project. And when we get down to, by the time we get through all the design documents, construction documents, GMP, award subs, get best and finals from subs and things of that nature, we'll be in a whole different ballpark. This is just an ask because we're putting cart before horse. And so we've done a lot of due diligence on it. Dave Cravenzola's done a lot of due diligence. We have 3 estimates. I feel I'm comfortable with all of them. I've done some side stuff on myself with estimates and school stuff, and these numbers are good. 79 is fine. 81 is not gonna. It's not gonna make a difference.
Chris, would you be comfortable with the 79 number?
I think was it 79.75? Is that right?
Yeah, 79.75, and that's comprised of 26.75 for Hindley, 24.50 for Holmes, and 28.50 for Royal.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's okay.
Okay.
I like.
Dave, maybe, sorry, Chris. I
Go.
would love to hear from Dave Cravenzola about what are you seeing other districts do at this stage?
Honestly, I was going to chime in on that. I think you're not giving yourselves as a group enough credit for the effort that you put into your projects ahead of time. I think that, the approach that you took at Oxridge and you're doing here to have engaged design teams as much as you have, to figure out some pathing of what you're looking for before going for a grant instead of kind of just sending a number out there. I think like what Paul said, I mean, at this point, to split hairs between 79, 75 and 81, you've gotten yourself, because of your efforts, so close to where you are that don't beat yourself up over those numbers. I think that you've done so much that, I think for you to be at 79, 75 is fine. You have a road ahead, right? There are a lot of discussions and a lot of evolution that's going to happen, and you're never going to notice that 1.25. So you've positioned yourselves very well, I think.
I think the other thing, we have a thorough budget, and if anyone questions it, we can show our work, so we backup estimates. These were the numbers we had at the time. We had escalation factors in. So I know 1.25 is a ton of money, and if I threw it on the floor and said everybody have at it, we'd all get on our hands and knees and die for it, as I used to say in all my construction meetings when we would fight over change orders that were small amounts. But in the grand scheme, like I said, we've more than done our work, and we can justify our number. There's no if we had to go back because something happened, of materials escalated or something with the schedule, and we had to go back, we are going to be able to pull these estimates out and show that we did this. We asked for this at this time because of this. We had escalation, we had contingency, we had, overrun costs. So
yeah, I agree. And Paul, I agree. You've done this process with eyes wide open to what volatilities there are and what risks there are in this. So I think you're not blind to it. You haven't ignored it. So
I think what both Dave Cravenzola and Paul Harding said is relevant, and we should probably be sure to make that point to BOS and BOF that we didn't pick these numbers out of the air, right? And if Dave Martin's willing to do it, he can walk those boards through our methodology, kind of like he just did here, so they understand the way we arrived at them, and we didn't just pick them out of the air, and we didn't just take the architect estimates at face value. That we drilled pretty deeply into them, we diligenced them, we questioned them, and we came up with numbers that we all feel very comfortable supporting.
Well, I've never been in those meetings, so I'll ask the question, but from what Kip told me, it was like they made a presentation, nobody questioned anything, for Oxridge at least. I mean, I assume that you're able to share O&G's estimate with them at these meetings if needed, to walk them through how we got there, and show them the architects and obviously Dave Martin's spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think, and we can, Jill, you and I can talk about this, whether we make those appendices to the presentation, or we just let people know that they're available.
I'd be totally transparent and have this information, since this is all public and being recorded, and we're asking for a large amount of money, but it's for the importance of our schools. I would absolutely make those things available to the people that have to vote on it. Information is power, as they say.
It's also defense, right? Okay. Any further thoughts, discussion? I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I just, again, not to belabor the point, but O&G does this. This is what they do. This is why we hired them, and then we put them in a tough spot to come up with this in a short amount of time with without design documents. But this is a professional this is a very professional group that's done a lot of work for our district, our schools, and we trust them, and we
Yeah.
know that we know we're getting. So I think
Yeah, no, I mean, I do. I think
that when you speak to the
yes.
finance RTM.
Yeah, no, good point. And before we
Thanks,
go to
Paul.
vote, I think it actually is worth a word of thanks to Dave Martin and Dave Cravanzola and Dave Cravanzola's
Absolutely.
team, who we haven't all met, but as you said, Paul, Dave Cravanzola put those guys under the gun. Essentially 48 hours to come up with what he came up with. Dave Martin, same thing. And obviously Mike Lynch with his soft cost estimates and his input on the whole process. It was a pretty Herculean effort to get from, pretty broad brush estimates done by the architects to what we have now.
One
So
other
thank
thing,
you, guys.
Chris, if you can remember this and make a note when you present, if Dave is not going to be there when you present, I don't know how this all works, but the thing I would say to the committee, if anything comes up, says O&G's estimators were not given the architect's estimates. They started from scratch themselves on what they had with, charrettes and land and everything and square footages. So they arrived at very similar numbers without, it wasn't like they looked at this and said, and followed that roadmap. They took their own roadmap to get to basically within reason, the same numbers. So that, this was a truly independent look at this outside of two very professional architects that came in with numbers within a reasonable thing. So
No, good point.
If for any reason it gets questioned or anything, you can use that logic, right, Dave? That would be, that's the way I would present it if I was presenting, if I had anybody question how I got to these numbers.
And really that's exactly how that's going to be for you as you go on through the project too. Your KG&D is going to have an estimator that estimates their various phases of design, schematic design development, and so will your construction manager. And they will, they will not share those estimates until they're done. You will see them unshared, and then there's a reconciliation process where they talk to make sure that they're actually pricing the same amount of work. So this is a kind of a microcosm of what you're going to experience throughout the project.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dr. Adley, do you have something to say?
No, but since you asked me, I'll just, since everybody's so confident in the work that's being done behind the scenes from Mike, Paul, and Dave Cravanzola and everybody else, and since the numbers are relatively confident on them, and since you're not talking a difference of 89,000 versus 79,000, and we're confident, you might as well take the elevator speech of keeping it in the 7. I don't know how much that makes a big difference in the bigger picture, but a quick discussion to people, what's the number of the 7 in front of instead of the 8, since it's not a big difference and we're so confident that I don't know if there's benefit in doing that for that purpose.
Okay, no, well taken. Yeah.
You need
Great.
me to make a motion for 7975?
I need to ask for one first. Can we get a motion to request an aggregate revised appropriation of 79.75 million, broken down specifically by school, that will present to the Board of Selectmen on Monday?
I'd like to make a motion for.
Paul moves, Dave Martin seconds. All in favor? Jill, you're on mute.
No, I think since we have 3 projects, I think it would be safer to vote on each individually than it would be to do the aggregate. My apologies, but
Yeah, no problem. Then let's.
I think that motion you just made should fail, actually.
Okay.
And then we
So
need
we'll remake. Yeah, so we'll remake. Dave Martin, can you give us the specific numbers for Hindley again?
Sure. The number for Hindley was 26 million spot 75.
Right, 26.75. Okay.
The number for Holmes was 24.50.
Okay.
And the number for Royal was 28.50. And that aggregates to the 79.75.
Okay. So then can we make a new motion for 3 separate adjusted appropriations that we will take to the Board of Selectmen on Monday, in the amount of 26.75 million for Hindley, 24.5 million for Holmes, and
Chris.
28.
Chris, sorry,
you
as a
wanna do-
matter, yeah, I'm sorry. As a matter of discipline, I think we need to get used to doing each school individually every time. Sorry.
Can I get a motion to go to the Board of Selectmen for 26.75 for Hindley?
No, who made the motion?
We need the motion.
I'll
Paul
take it.
moves.
Paul moves,
Paul
Sarah
moves.
seconds.
Sarah seconds. All in favor? Passed. Can we get a motion to go to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance for 24.5 million for homes? Paul moves. Dave
David.
Kerwar seconds. All in favor? Paul, I think you need to vote. Unanimous. Can we get a motion to go to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for 28.5 million for Royal on Monday and Tuesday?
Go ahead, Jill.
Dave moves, Jill seconds. All in favor? Passes. That'll be the last time I use the aggregate number.
Doubtful.
Did anybody else have any items or business that they wanted to bring up in front of the committee? Otherwise, in terms of next steps, I will reach out to the 3 architects.
Chris, I had one thing.
Yeah,
I think this might be the time to discuss it. Since we're now going to release an architect to do a design, I think it's important we explore the area next to home school, the wetland / parking lot. Because if that's going to get folded in, or if that's of use to us, that space, best to have the architects, given a heads up that, hey, we're looking at this, if this could be incorporated or in any way. I know that's a parallel path we have to go down with the town, but I think it's, you want to give them as much time up front, because that could, not being a design person myself, but could give them thoughts on parking and other things, expansion to that area. So
right.
would
The
just
answer,
mention
no. Great point. I think the response on that is the initial gating issue is whether that parcel is usable, and usable covers a couple of things. To figure out usable, the first thing we need to get back is the land survey, which is underway, and that parcel is being incorporated into the land survey of the home's property. And so we need to figure out from the survey, elevation, whether it's wetlands, grade, things like that, right? We'll find that out from the survey. Secondly, we then need to talk to Planning and Zoning, Department of Public Works, and see what they view in terms of the usability of that parcel. And then we can discuss, I guess at that point, it would in effect be making a recommendation, or no, well, no, it'd be making a request to the town to consider incorporating that into the home's property. So Jill, jump in if I got this wrong, but the town owns the school properties, and this would be in effect annexed, incorporated into.
The town owns all of our properties, but the Board of Ed has care, custody, and control of a number of properties. The town has not, the Board of Education has not requested care, custody, and control of the Curtis project.
So yeah, if we move forward, the town would in effect turn it over to the
We have to have those
schools.
conversations. The Board of Selectmen retains control over the Curtis property. So
We
Right.
are planning to, we are mentioning, we will talk about the fact that we're evaluating the Curtis property in our presentations to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM. That is already in there. And Chris will, outline our next steps as appropriate. I know Randy has been following some things. Maybe we want to put this specifically as an agenda item on our next meeting, because then we can get an update from Randy, find out where it is in the survey process. And then if there were any questions that came up in the Selectmen or Finance meeting, we could remember to discuss it again there.
And then also, yeah, I mean, Mike, you said that the surveyors were out in the field, or the surveyor was out in the field this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jason Mead had a team. They started at Royal yesterday morning, and they're there today again. They should finish today, and hopefully, I don't know which building they're going to next, but I think they had a project get postponed, so they freed up time like a week early in their schedule, and plugged us in.
I think Chris also, Eric is probably aware of it, but I think we mentioned to him, you might just want to mention that, when you award to him, that the Curtis thing is on the table, that, just.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I will. Anything else from anybody? So the next big milestone is Monday, Board of Selectmen, I believe 7:30, Sarah?
Yep.
Anybody who wishes to attend, certainly welcome. I believe it's going to be Dave Martin, Jill, and myself at this point. Anybody else that wants to attend would be more than welcome for moral support. Beyond that, I didn't have any other, and then same for Board of Finance the next evening, I believe at 8 p.m. Dave Martin?
No, 7.
7?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll double check the time and let you guys know.
I promise not to be late. Okay.
I think it's 7:30. I think Board of
7:30.
Selectmen is 7 and Board of Finance is 7:30.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
But I'll confirm that. I'm going to clean up this spreadsheet and resend it to people, and I'll confirm that with that email.
Great. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Jill moves, Dave Kerwar seconds, all in favor. Thank you, everybody. Again, I can't say enough about all the hard work that people did all week on this. And we have a lot of wood to chop between now and, the end of Tuesday evening. But thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend. Paul Harding, feel better.
Yeah, Paul.